So for our last panel discussion, we're going to cover global approaches to toxins in our cardiology panel. We have Dr. Serena Vanderzee, Dr. Sanjay Rapagopalan, and Dr. Francesca Casalino. You guys could come to the stage. Same format as before. Dr. Vanderzee is our moderator. And if you have any questions, we'll pass around the microphone. There'll be online questions. And we have a hard stop at 3 o'clock and a few more raffles to give away. So let's get on with it.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. Let me start with a few practical questions that came up. How important is choosing organic food?
First, I think we have to sort of understand, I presume all of you are experts in organic produce, but just so that for a start, so that we understand we're speaking the same language, organic is a production method, right? So principally it refers to addition of pesticides, usage of antibiotics and animal feed, and various other chemicals not being added. So these things are not being done to the food. So it's a production type approach. From a cardiometabolic perspective, I would say the most important thing is the macronutrient and micronutrient quality of food, right? So let's put that out. That's the first decision point. So organic, to me, at least, factors in when you are talking about reducing your pesticide exposures, when you're trying to reduce antibiotic, non-GMO or GMO ingredients, and other things that you do to food. And specifically for me, the decision point is, where do I want to avoid those exposures? So if you want to avoid pesticide exposures, we talked about the dirty dozen today, and pesticide exposures might be particularly important in certain groups of individuals, pregnancy, children, rapid growth phases. You really want to avoid those types of exposures. I think it's less important for older individuals, not that that's not important, but from a pricing perspective, you have to balance nutritional quality with pricing and get the best bang for the buck. So to me, I would say the first decision point is don't compromise on nutritional quality. Always focus on fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, those types of things are important foods, right? Whole foods are important, right? On the other hand, if you want to make a decision point on whether it's worthwhile purchasing organic foods, you might want to choose, if you happen to be in one of these categories, or if you happen to be an individual that consumes a lot of meats, for instance, and you're in a rapid growth phase, it might be best to avoid non-organic foods because you get a lot of ingredients and you're consuming a lot of it. So I look at that as two important decision points. First is don't compromise on whole foods. And again, avoid ultra-processed foods. Whole foods is important. Secondly, organic becomes important in certain subgroups of individuals where these types of decisions can have big consequences in terms of health. Does that make sense? So that's the way I think about it. I don't know what you...
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add to that. I would say sort of going off of that for me, I don't think I've bought as much organic food as in the past 2 years since I've had a 2-year-old baby. So, and babies eat a lot of berries, and that's in the dirty dozen. So that's something that I am spending way more money than I normally would on. And I think that that's a priority and an important thing for me. And so I think organic is more expensive, as he alluded to, and I think trying to figure out a way to balance that in your life is important. And then beyond that, I mean, I have a lot of patients, I ask every day what they eat in clinic, what their diet is. And a lot of people start off, well, I go to the farmer's market, I got a lot of organic, which is great. But I think it's also very important beyond that, sticking to sort of the traditional Mediterranean diet and what we eat from a cardiovascular standpoint is also really important in balancing all of that.
I like to say, I think a blueberry is still better than an organic cookie. Yeah. Hopefully that puts things in perspective.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I have a question regarding the olive oil. I saw on one of your scales, olive oil was on the good side of the food. So considering that olive oil is a big part of Mediterranean diet, good for cardiovascular health, olive oil was on the middle with the yellow dot. That kind of bothered me right away. Do you have any explanation about that? Or should we consider something when we buy olive oil, organic?
I think I'm the culprit. I had one of my slides, right?
Okay, perfect.
One of these. Not Serena, not Francisca. Okay. I don't know if I recall seeing a yellow dot, but maybe it was on the graphic that shows you environmental impact versus nutritional impact, right? So you're basically treading the balance between what's good for you from a health perspective and what's likely to be least environmentally. So I guess that's the balance we're talking about. Look, olive oil is good for you. In general, I think the cardiometabolic effects of monounsaturated fats are good. They're preferable to using something like polyunsaturated fatty acids, right? There's no question. There's good randomized controlled evidence to suggest that foods that are rich in monounsaturated fatty acids are good for you. But I think I'm not an expert in olive farming, quite frankly, so I don't know what the environmental consequences are, and maybe they consume a lot of water, I don't know, and they're typically grown in areas, right? You're from the area? Okay, yeah. So that might be it, but it's good for you from a cardiometabolic perspective. Agreed? Serena, you agree? Okay, Francis.
Okay. When you travel, should you research the water, buy bottled water, or travel with a filter?
Are you outdoors people? I don't know. I'm not an intrepid traveler with capsules, but the question was, should you filter water?
Or when you travel, should you research the water quality and where you're going?
Oh, I see.
And
I don't. I mean, that's a little too much. I mean, just imagine I'm already going through the new place that I'm trying to visit, on top of that. As long as it's a cleanly sourced water source and you trust, the source, I think it's generally okay, but I don't normally test the water. No.
How are we doing in terms of transparency and reporting in this country?
That's a great question. I will say this, look, I'm not an expert in food labels, but I will say a good friend, a colleague of mine, Dr. Mozaffarian, who does a lot of work in Tufts University, would say that we have some ways to go in terms of transparency. And transparency can mean a lot of different things. It's one to say, okay, here's the ingredients in a label, in a food. But if you bury it in fine print at the bottom of it, nobody's going to read it, right? So what good is that? So he's always been a proponent, and many European countries do it, but they make food labels very easy to understand. So ultra-processed foods, in fact, come with a label that says, on a scale of, let's say green, yellow, and red colors, it's labeled red if it's ultra-processed. Okay, that makes it very easy for you to shop for foods because it's transparent, simple to understand. And you know this, you have radio ads that talk about labels, but they speed up the speed, and you can barely hear them. So it's like all of the bad stuff is speeded up, right? So labels are an equivalent of that. If you put that in fine print, nobody's going to read it. So I agree with Dr. Mozaffarian in terms of the FDA, and there's been recent changes in FDA, if you haven't followed the news lately, but the FDA is always, in charge of these types of, labeling, and it should be one of the, I guess it doesn't fall under the FDA, but the proponent is they should probably take much more of an active role in terms of food labels because it has health consequences. Yeah.
I have a question. Back to the Clean 15. I noticed on the Clean 15 it had corn, and I was reading that corn, 85% of the corn that's produced in the U.S. is GMO. So I'm wondering what you feel about that. I try and eat mostly organic because, when you read stuff, sometimes I think I should just stop reading. So I'm wondering how corn is in the Clean 15 if it's mostly GMO, because as far as I know, GMO is really bad for us. So what do you feel about that?
So I would say my general understanding of the Clean 15 is, does that fruit or vegetable have some sort of encasing that's preventing you from having the pesticide directly on it? So if you think about corn, it's grown with a husk around it. And so when that comes off, that's that exposure of the corn that you're actually eating. Same with like an orange or a banana or something. Something like that is decreasing your exposure, where you think about kale or spinach or berries, there's no encasing. Leafy greens specifically have all those little nooks and crannies where it's really hard to clean them. So I think that's sort of what makes that distinction. I don't know if that's your impression as well.
That's my understanding as well, because it refers to fruits and vegetables that have low pesticide content because they have some sort of outer layer or protection that prevents them from high pesticide levels. So if you're trying to avoid pesticides, you would choose categories from Clean 15 because they have lower levels of pesticides.
I'm specifically asking about genetically modified.
GMOs, right. So yes, I mean, if you really feel that GMO foods are to be avoided, then you would avoid many genetically modified forms of corn. And you're correct. Corn is, many strains of corn are genetically modified.
No, but as medical profession, I'm asking you,
Oh,
what do you
asking
think
me
about
whether
it?
I feel that, it's still the jury is out on that. I don't know how you guys feel. I mean, to a large extent, many of the strains, plant strains in this country are genetically modified. I don't even know how many of them are actually originally non-modified anymore, but the jury is out. I don't know the answer to that, quite frankly. Good question, though.
Hi, guys. I'm right here, back here as a patient. And as someone that's living with hypercholesterolemia and atherosclerosis, and very grateful to be under the care of the coolest and most collaborative Dr. Weinberg. So thank you so much. It's so great to find doctors that work with you and work where you are, not where they want to go. So I'm grateful for that. But I have a question about something that we haven't talked about much, and I hope that you can address. Dr. Sanjay, loved hearing about the forest bathing concept. I think I've been doing that since I was a kid for free, but I didn't know that there was a name for it so now I'm going to tell all my friends. In a recent article, I read that AI data centers are coming for your land, your water, and your power. I think they forgot about your health as well. So how do we prepare for this new species that's about to take over our land and our lives? That's my question.
I have two words for you. Elon Musk. He's sending them out to space, so you don't have to worry about it. No, jokes apart. So you're right. I mean, data centers are taking up large amounts of land because that's what it takes. They also cause a lot of, they've had renewed demand for fossil fuels energy sources because they use natural gas, and now they're talking about nuclear, and now they're thinking about space because they want to send AI satellites and data centers to space so that they don't take up your land, right? So that's a problem, but it's a general problem with arable land throughout the world, right? I mean, there's a marked increase in deforestation. I would look at those conventional areas of opportunity before. Clearly, I think AI, hopefully, and data engineering is going to make our lives more efficient. There are obviously other problems, but I would say a much larger problem is deforestation in Africa, in the Amazon, in parts of this country, where, land that could be used for nature purposes or habitat preservation is being destroyed, right? That is a concern, and it's a complex question. It's a balance between what we need to do to move forward as a civilization and to use lands appropriately. So I don't know if I have a good answer for you, but the first answer is probably, just a joke, by the way. So.
Me? Okay. So for those who want to grow their own produce, taking a step back, what do we need to look at in terms of getting soil? If you're buying it in a bag, then you're buying it in a plastic bag. And if you're buying it in a plastic bag, then what are we supposed to look for on that bag? This may be way too specific, but it just seems like if we're going to try to control what we're eating with a raised bed, perhaps not in the ground, that at least we can control that one raised bed. And that one raised bed gets, full of toxins or whatnot, we get rid of it and we resupply. So is there anything out there about where the best place is to get soil, or anyway?
I think that's why I have a nervous cough, as you see, because that's entering areas of expertise that I don't possess. Maybe I'll punt this to my esteemed colleagues here.
Yeah, I mean, I also am not an expert. My husband does some landscaping. He has his own company, and he likes to focus on organic and native. I would say there are large, and so going off what he's told me when I'm listening to his projects he's putting together, there are areas where you can go to get sort of where they're chipping up trees, et cetera, where you could get it right directly from the source. I can't tell you where that would be, but I do know that those facilities exist. And there are, yes, a lot of these soils are coming in bags, but there are soil that is more based on organic without any sort of chemicals, et cetera. And I think this is something that sort of goes back into the last panel, but I did want to make a comment that he's been looking into regarding sort of the soil concern with the wildfires. There are certain plants that you can plant in your soil in your garden that are supposed to leach up some of the heavy metals, et cetera, and toxins, sunflowers being one of them. So I recommend everyone plant sunflowers.
Thanks. While we're waiting, okay, let me just ask one from the online audience, and then we'll take some more from our audience here. What do you think have been the biggest policy successes and the greatest opportunities?
I think the biggest policy success in this country are, two. I think air pollution regulation and lead policy impact. Huge results and huge payoffs in terms of improving children's cognition, even IQ scores in this country, avoidance of hypertension and cardiovascular disease for lead, and for air pollution, clearly incredible benefits in health with return on investment in terms of money that's put in to enact regulation, right? So it's got a very good ROI, if you will. So those are two good examples. Yeah.
Great. And what are you excited about, or what do you see as a big opportunity?
I think it's clearly clean energy. It's transformative, just like AI. It's like incredible. And I often scratch my head when I think about folks opposed to it. It's so stupid at multiple levels. But it's a phenomenal opportunity because it has health impact, number one. And every experiment that people have done have shown that it's a good return on investment. So if you spend $1 in clean energy, it pays back in terms of jobs, number one, economics. So people who oppose this have no idea, and maybe there are folks in the audience, but I'd like to reach out to you to say it makes perfect economic sense, it makes good health sense, so it's a huge opportunity. And we don't want to lose competitive advantage to countries around the world that are taking this on. So if you're locally connected to politicians and folks who might listen, please do reach out and tell them that this is not good policy. This is not good industrial policy to go back to coal mining or fossil fuels when the rest of the world is shifting at a rapid pace.
Amen.
Yeah,
Just a little side to that, I just have a worry with lithium batteries and what we need for lithium, and also the effects of lithium fires and the car you drive or in your home or that type of thing in your pocket. That's something that really scares me.
So I presume that's a comment? Yeah, right, okay.
Yeah, I don't know that what we can do with clean energy with that as an aside.
Yeah, I think let me address that because this is a question that often comes up where they say, well, clean energy. And we all admit that the cost of some of the metals involved in clean energy and decarbonization do come at a huge environmental cost. And I'll readily admit, and it should be said, and thanks for bringing it up, that the other side of it is that many of the decarbonization or clean energy technologies also involve risk, and environmental risk, and sometimes even unknown human risk. But the difference there is there's at least an attempt at recycling some of these entities, right? Batteries can be recycled. They don't go into a... Normally, people thinking about these things are also thinking about the cycle of using those materials back. So that is spurring innovation in the area of reuse of these materials back in a closed loop so that they don't go back into the environment. And that's usually the case. I mean, car batteries are not going to go back into a dust heap or dump somewhere in Arizona, right? They're typically taken back and reprocessed. So this type of closed loop mechanism where you recycle earths, rare metals, and batteries, et cetera, makes sense to me. But it is a good point. It must be acknowledged that we don't understand some of the large scale. For instance, I mean, if you're thinking about sourcing these metals from Congo and there's environmental degradation and stuff that, we're not paying for that. That country is paying for it. There's negative externalities of these types of decisions that's sometimes hard to calculate, right? But it's a very good point.
Yeah, I think there was a plant that recently blew up that was making these things, and then all of the pollutants were going into the air. That was very frightening.
It is frightening.
I might be wrong.
Thank you all very much. The focus today was jet particles can be in the macrophages, but also it can be in macrophages in the lung. Does that have oncogenic effect, cancer development? If you're exposed to fire for 2, 3, 4 weeks, the damage happens and it can cause effect over years. Is that a possibility, number one?
It is, of course. I mean, there's an extensive literature linking exposures like air pollution to lung cancer. No question.
Okay.
We know that it's, in fact, one of the most important causes. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So, but on a scale of events, the number of cardiovascular events outtrumps the number of cancers. But it is absolutely an important metric for some of these exposures.
Yeah, the other issue is we all try to look for safety, we buy bottled water. How safe are they?
Well, I think in general, I would say that you're referring to plastic exposures with water bottles. The answer is I don't know what the risk is. I would say, on my slide, I would say weathered plastics or plastics that have been degraded are probably more risky than drinking out of a water bottle. But having, you have a choice. I saw a nice, obviously this is a pretty fancy hotel, and Dr. Weinberg and my colleagues from Pacific Heart Institute are putting us through a very luxurious experience here, living, sitting here. And if you noticed, the water bottles that I had were aluminum, content. I love those bottles, right? They're reusable. But if you're in a closed loop, recyclable system, I don't think it's bad. Now, back in Ohio, I mean, I could drink out of a water bottle and put it into there's no recycling whatsoever. I don't know what happens to, water bottles. So I don't normally, I take my own bottles, right? So I don't take. So in general, it's a good practice not even to use plastic bottles, number one. But on a scale of things, I would say the preferable thing to do would be not to use plastic bottles, use something else. You take your own bottles, recycle, wherever possible. But if you happen to live in a place, or if you're traveling, it's not the end of the world if you drink out of a plastic water bottle.
Yes, thank you. So a question I actually had was just more on the clinical end. So we've had a lot of discussion about mechanisms and how that can drive cardiovascular risk, and even sort of gone into some of the therapeutic avenues as well. But I'm thinking more along the lines of translating this clinically, and I'm curious because you made this excellent comment rooted in the literature about lead, cadmium, and arsenic specifically, and how those can have impact for health and maybe even on the cardiovascular realm. So my question is specifically, at what point do we look at those levels in a clinical setting? How routinely should they be checked? Or is there evidence to check them at all in terms of being able to drive action? Because right now, I do know at least one or two primary care doctors in our community who sort of check this at large. And some people would feel that's a little fringe. Others might think that maybe he's onto something. Don't want to give out names. So, there's varying opinions. And of course, as this becomes a more prominent issue in cardiology and in medicine, these questions are going to come up. So I'm just curious, where are we in terms of the diagnostic aspect?
Maybe I should take this. Yeah. So I would say I don't know if you noticed, I had a slide. It was very busy, but it went through what do clinicians do with this information, right? Do you start, look, we all have, as a physician, I can say, I have a fairly busy practice. I want to really focus on things that can make a big difference for you today, right? So when you have a 40-minute appointment, if I spend 20 minutes talking about an esoteric exposure, environmental exposure that might have no consequence to your health, I'm not going to do that, just to make sure. So what I do is focus on what I can do to change your, and I think that's the practice of most of my colleagues. You focus on the known knowns and focus on things that you know how to lower risk, okay? Now, having said that, now let's move past that. There's a lot that we know as cardiologists that many patients that I see, and I'm sure this is the case with you all, when they're sent to you, they're not optimized. You could push their LDL cholesterols a little lower. I could lower your hemoglobin A1C, do a little bit better, and there's a little bit of fine-tuning, shall we say, that can happen. So I do that. But then, if there are young patients who have risk factors and something called SMRF, this is patients who have a heart attack because they don't lack the standard modifiable risk factors. They're referred to as SMRFs, SMRFs. So if you don't have standard modifiable risk factors and something going on, that, tweaks my attention. I say, should I be getting something else, right? So in those patients, I might consider these types of things. But generally speaking, if you live in an area, so that's one aspect. So if I see an atypical patient who otherwise has no other modifiable risk factors, I think about environmental exposures like cadmium, arsenic, nickel, et cetera. The other situation is an environment where you know that these exposures are very common, right? If it happens to be a wildfire, in Ohio we've had wildfires, from Canada coming over, and people want to know. So when you have a raging wildfire, it's probably appropriate to talk about that with your patients. So that's another opportunity. But I don't routinely talk about environmental exposures because of time constraints and just, So I choose where I have to spend my time effectively.
So my question is about environmental toxins and would you recommend organic food? There are some environmental toxins we have no control over, like the fires that happened, or the federal government we're with right now. Those are environmental hazards we can do nothing about. But we can eat organic food. So why wouldn't we do something that makes a difference? Like, we have a choice of smoking or not smoking. Yes, it's an addiction and it's difficult and people struggle. But eating organic food helps. Or exercise. Why wouldn't we do what we can do and, let the other things, we learn to cope with them or find changes in them. But I just feel like it's so important to eat organic food, if we can. So that's just a comment.
Thank you.
I have a question. I don't know if this is true, but if you can't get organic food, they say you could put white vinegar in water, and leave the unorganic food in it for like about a half hour, and it helps pull out the pesticides. Is that true? I heard that from a health inspector.
I did that. I did that with blueberries and grapes.
Is that true?
Organic, and so for the vinegar.
I would say generally, to your comment, I think the question of organic foods, is also sometimes an economic issue for some people. Like where I live, a lot of people can't buy them because they can't afford them. It's much cheaper to buy, certain types of foods. But that aside, I think soaking, the Dirty Dozen, for instance, in large amounts of water. I don't know about vinegar. Maybe it has the acidic quality, has some effects on leaching out certain other things. But in general, if you soak it, it does, and leave it for a while, it does take out some of the pesticides. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. My name is Julie Swift. I'm probably the only dietitian in the audience, registered dietitian here. I'm a professor at LMU. I've been teaching nutrition for 20 years. So I just want to say, eating fruits and vegetables is way more important than getting organic, okay? Eat your fruits and vegetables. Go to the farmer's market. We have a wonderful farmer's market here in Santa Monica. Some of the farmers are not organic because it is very expensive for farmers to produce organic fruits and vegetables. And just recent, one farmer, he dropped his status after 17 years because of the paperwork. So if you're buying fruits and vegetables, you're there at the farmer's market. Don't worry about them being organic, okay? There is a controversy on the EWG's Dirty Dozen. I have to put it out there. Dr. Andrea Love, she's an immunologist and a microbiologist. She basically says it doesn't have like tough scientific rigor. I used to teach it, but I haven't been because the bottom line is most Americans do not get enough fruits and vegetables. And what we find is that when we tell people buy organic, it makes them eat less fruits and vegetables overall. Now, if you have the privilege of buying organic berries, go for it. I do that for my family. I have that privilege. But most Americans, there's so many Americans that go hungry. So I just have to put it out there that eat more fruits and vegetables, you'll be in a much better place. Don't worry about the minutia of is this organic or is that organic. Really think about the quality of your diet in general and not just about it being organic. And then as far as washing, yeah, but vinegar does help. If you wash your vegetables in water and vinegar, you don't even need to spend money and buy those fancy sprays or anything like that. So I just want to say thank you to you guys and all the toxins out there, fire victim here. So definitely want to know if there's any specific chemicals I need to be testing for before I move back into my house. And I love that you guys are talking about plastics because I probably bought my metal water bottle 20 years ago. But then before that, I used to have water bottles in my hot car, as a dietitian. So the other thing I wanted to say is try not to worry about what you can't control, right? I can control the water bottle I have. I can't control, that there was this wildfire. So thank you.
Great comment.
I did want to make a comment about something we haven't talked about, if that's okay, in line with things you can control and can't control. How many people in this room order from Amazon? So if you think about how many packages are traveling around the world because of online shopping, how many fossil fuels are going into that, how much carbon dioxide is going into the environment from that, the particles, and then think about all the packaging that goes along with that. And then where does a lot of this stuff go? How many of you then go to Whole Foods a few days later and return that package? And most of the time, those packages go to a facility where it's not then sent to someone else. It's just put in a huge trash heap that's transferred to some country in the world that accepts trash and affecting their environment and their water sources and the air they breathe. And so I think something that we can all do, that we do have complete control over, and I know that it's not easy, and I know that conveniences drives all of this, and we have enough stuff that we're dealing with in our lives, but I think trying to make a conscious effort to decrease your online shopping, and I know the world is not making it easy because there aren't a lot of stores anymore to go shopping at, but I think that's something that we can all make an effort to do and would have a huge impact.
And yeah, so to underscore the principle of do what you have control over, what's good for you, and from a health standpoint, and likely the reverberations of that for your community and your planet will follow. So I think we'll end unless anybody has any other questions.
Hi, I'm Olivia lot of 18 to 31-year-olds right out of, they're at UC Davis, they're undergrads and they're grad students. And I have, in the 23 years I've practiced, seen a complete difference in the young adult health. Definitely 1 in 3 have prediabetes, they're overweight, they're stressed, of course, and they're not eating great. And I can feel very overwhelmed on how to help them. So I'm backing it up because now I feel really well prepared when our wildfires hit, because they always do up there. I know what to tell them and whatever, we can move on. But it's the other toxins, like the stress, the food, the lack of exercise. And so my question's twofold. I would love to hear how I could help you guys, not have to see them down the road. Like, where can I get the biggest bang for my buck with them? Because it can feel super overwhelming to me. And then the second thing is, the 18 to 44-year-olds now trust sometimes TikTok providers over us. And so something that we try to do in our system is to find these links that we can send them that are reputable, and once they trust us, they will follow these people and listen to what they're saying. So my question is, what can I do to help you? And then number 2, do you guys have any recommendations of reputable TikTokers? I'm not on TikTok, so I don't even know how that works, but, or websites. Like, I always tell them to go to the Mayo Clinic. I should probably tell them to go to the Kaiser sites, but whatever. I like Mayo's. So anyway, I'd love to hear from you guys.
I would say bang for your buck is exercise to reduce stress, to improve your, metabolic standpoint. I know that's not, I'll say that to half of my patients and they're like, I don't like exercise. So I always try and figure out a way to say, what if you can improve however you can, that's going to help you. And you want to figure out something that you enjoy, because if you don't enjoy it, it's not going to be sustainable. So figuring out some way to be active is going to have huge benefits for stress, your weight, your cardiovascular profile. No.
I appreciate it. It's hard to say you need to do your diet, you need to manage your stress, and you need to exercise. So I'm like, where do I start here?
I think, with apologies to our healthcare system, because they should be really rewarding folks like you for spending the time, because you're in every sense of the word the frontline folks dealing with primordial prevention, right, where before it becomes manifest. So hopefully there will be changes in incentivizing primary care providers so that they can spend more time with their patients, number one. It is very overwhelming because you have to cover a lot of ground, in addition to what you're doing with your patients. But I think working in teams sometimes, and again, it's complicated because we have a cardiometabolic program that we run for individuals who have disease, where we have a structured approach where we have an exercise trainer, a dietitian that can take the load off and give them tips while you can advise them on certain things. So it really takes the pressure off of me because I don't have to spend 30 minutes talking about diet, which is a foundation of everything that we do, and exercise, right? So maybe creative ways of create a practice model where you can essentially engage other alternate care providers that can take the stress off is one way to do it. But the catch there is, how do you incentivize and develop economic models where that becomes affordable for you as a practice, right? So, but Kaiser, you work for Kaiser, right? So you can certainly put together, and Kaiser is all about primordial prevention. So thinking about this in a way in which it offsets some of the time that you commit through a team-based approach can have better success, I think. So I don't know.
I don't have any recommendations on TikTok. I'm also not on TikTok. Rigvid, do you have any ideas?
There was a recent study. I don't know, I could not give you the citation right now because I don't have that memorized. Only 2% of nutrition information provided on TikTok is accurate. So it's accurate. So 98% of nutrition information provided on TikTok is inaccurate. So I teach college students, I'm getting this. The amount of misinformation that comes to me is crazy. So there is a dietitian, and she has a PhD in nutrition also. Dr. Jessica Nurick, Knurick, or Dr. Jess on TikTok. She's also on Instagram. I had to download TikTok last week because of a new client. And there's also Dr. Is. He is a doctor in the UK, so he's MBBS. Dr. IDZ. But I wrote this down for you, and I can give it to you to give to your younger clients, because this is the way that the young people are getting their information. And again, 98% false nutrition information on TikTok, and it's everywhere. I mean, the best advice is to, not go on TikTok, right? Set that limit for yourself. So that's why my daughter doesn't have it.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate the panelists' time and expertise.
Thank you, Serena. Thank you, Francis.
Thank you.